All right, welcome to lab number 8 of the AZ-104 course, Managing Virtual Machines. So we're going to be taking a look at some virtual machines and storage for them as well during this lab. I'm just going to start off immediately. First task is to deploy zone resilient virtual machines. So going over to the virtual machines UI and then create. And what we want to do is create an Azure virtual machine. This gives us the virtual machine wizard. So we got to use our resource group that we have pre-created. And then we're going to do 2 virtual machines, or virtual machines in 2 different zones. So I'm going to use zone 1 and zone 2 here in the East US region. Now note that that changes this naming tab. So now we're supposed to be giving 2 names. So let's do that. So edit names. AZ-104 VM1 and AZ-104 VM2. Great. Security type should be standard. I'm going to use the 2019 Windows Server image. The size is supposed to be a D2SV3, that's correct. Now we're going to call the administrator local admin, and then we're going to make a really cool password for them. All right. Import port rules we don't need at all. That should be it. And let's go to disks. The disk type premium SSD is going to be okay for us. We want the disk to be deleted when the VM gets deleted, and we don't need ultra disk compatibility. Let's go over for networking. This is all okay. We want to delete the public IP and NIC when the VM is deleted as well, and we don't need any load balancing. On management, with regards to patch orchestration, we want Azure to take care of that, so that way the availability sets are actually taken into acknowledgement. On monitoring, we disable boot diagnostics. We don't really need for this demo. And I think here we are okay with everything being default. So just go ahead and create the virtual machines. All right, now our deployment is done. So here is the virtual machine 1, for example. And there could be even more. So if we go back to virtual machines, we should be able to see both as we do. So let's see what we can do with this existing virtual machine. If we go over to availability and scale here, we can click on size. So we know what our current size is from the when we actually created it. So it's over here as well, standard D2SV3. All right, so that's over here, D2SV3. You can see it has 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of memory. So one of the things that we could do is, let's say that we don't actually need that much capacity, and we want to rescale the virtual machine to be a smaller one. So yeah, the smaller one suggested over here is DS1 version 2. For our purposes, that could be totally okay. Note that the cost difference is significant, right? But we're going down to 1 CPU and just 3.5 gigs of memory. Now, when we press resize here, it's going to tell us that we can do this, and that if the virtual machine is currently running, this will cause it to be restarted. So basically what happens is it's going to shut down our existing virtual machine and then, create a new one and start up over there. That's something we can do. So now the size is DS1 version 2 here in the list, as well as here DS1 V2. And you can see that it's currently updating the status, so it'll be up in a second. Meanwhile, other thing that we can do is look at the disks. So previously, we worked with disk as kind of standalone objects, and we can manage disks that way as well. Let me just quickly show you. If we go over to disks, then you can see all of the disks that were created together with that virtual machine as well. However, we can also look at the disks that are actually attached to the virtual machine from this view as well. So one thing that we can do is we can have additional so-called data disks added to a virtual machine, right? So this is different from the original disk that we defined, because the original disk holds the operating system on it. Whereas if we attach or create a data disk, that doesn't have anything on it, right? So we can just fill it with data. And there's some cool things that we can do with that. So let me just first get us into the cheapest possible disk. 32 gigs. All right. And then let's add that. So this will create a disk. And then it will also attach it to the virtual machine. So you can think of there being like a virtual cable being attached to the virtual machine itself. All right, so now the disk is here. And if we scroll to the right here, we can see this detached icon, and then we apply that. All right, that took ages. Now the disk has been detached. So we need to go back to disks. And then we can see it over here. And we can do all kinds of stuff with it. Look at its current size, and also change the size or the type. So let's now go from a standard HDD to a standard SSD instead. There we go. And now we can go back to our virtual machine and disks, and now we can attach it back, right? It's going to be this disk over here, and now it's a standard SSD disk. wonderful world of disks that live outside of the virtual machines. Okay, so next up, let's take a look at some scale sets. So these are virtual machine scale sets there. And let's create one. And in here, we need to set up some basic configuration. So we're gonna define the resource group again. We're gonna call it the virtual machine scale set 1. It's gonna be in the US, and let's select all zones. Orchestration. We're just going to use uniform orchestration, so we have the same instance replicated. Security can just be standard. Then the scaling mode. Do we want it to be auto scaling or manually? I'm just going to do manually for now. 2019 data center, that's correct. Standard D2S V3, it's all right. Then again, the username and password. All right, that should do it. We don't need spot for this. Then disks. So we're going to be happy with the standard disk. And networking. We're going to create a new VNet for these because we didn't have one yet. Let's call it the VMSS VNet. It's going to be in our resource group. And then the address range should be something like 10.82.0.0/20. And then we're going to create a subnet for the beginning of that range. Okay, I think this is good. Then we have the network interface. We can take a look at that. So you can deselect the security group for the network interface, and then we can set it to be advanced, and then create a new network security group for this. Let's call it the VMSS1 network security group. Let's add some additional rules. So from anywhere, any port to anywhere, as long as it's HTTP, we want to allow. Let's just call it allow HTTP. Okay, so that's in place. Then we can select whether our machines will have public IP addresses. We're going to enable that. Okay. Then with regards to load balancing, we could use an Azure load balancer for traffic on this. We need to create one, of course, first. I'm just going to call it a VMSS LB. And it's going to be public. We're going to just use the defaults here. All right. So then on management, this is roughly the same as in the virtual machine wizard. So I'm going to disable boot diagnostics with help. We don't need to do anything here. On the advanced, They're also not really anything for us. So we can just go ahead and try to create this scale set. All right, it's been created. So let's go and take a look. Here it is. So these are all of the definitions that we had for our scale set. Over here, we can take a look at the instances that have been created on our behalf. We said that we wanted to have 2. Under availability and scale, we can now update the scaling configuration. We currently have it as manual. So we could just, add or remove instances from the scale set. Just put it back to 2. But we can also scale based on a metric. So that is, in Azure speak, custom autoscale, like this. And then we're creating a setting for this autoscale, right? So basically what we're doing here is we want to scale based on a metric. And very often we're scaling on the average of a CPU. So I'm going to add that as a rule. So the metric namespace here is the virtual machine host, and what we're looking at is the percentage of the CPU. We could also have disk, cache, disk IOPS, all kinds of stuff, memory, and other things, right? But for us, we're just going to be using the standard or the most used scaling method, which is the CPU percentage. All right. So percentage average, CPU average, note that it'll average out the CPU percentage of all of the virtual machines that we have in our scaling set. If the average CPU is greater than 70 for 10 minutes, so the average CPU usage is over 70% for 10 minutes, then increase the count of instances by 1. We could also do increase the percent by 20%, right? So we increase by 1, but then once we have 10 instances, it starts to increase 2 at a time instead of just 1. And then after you've done this action, don't do anything for 5 minutes, right? That's what that cooldown means. So wait for 5 minutes until you're starting to look at the average CPU again, right? So that we don't do multiple simultaneous scaling operations simultaneously, at the same time. All right, so that's that. It's also important to always do a scale in rule, right? So now we're scaling out. We also want to be able to scale in. And now we are using the same metric. However, we want to say that if the metric now is less than 30, so if the average CPU usage is less than 30%, then decrease by 20%. Take away 20% of the instances that we have. So now I have both a scale up and a scale down rule in place. Then, of course, if our system is not used, we might not want to scale down to 0. So we can set up a minimum amount of instances here. 2 is a good start, right? So then we're still highly available. And we can also set the maximum number here so that we don't go bankrupt, right? So we're going to say that, okay, after 10 instances, we're just not going to add anymore. And the default one is the one that we're going to start off with before looking at the metrics at all. And we actually happen to have 2 right now, so that makes sense. So then we can save this. And that's done. And now if our auto-scaling configuration would change something, we would be able to view from the list of instances, that they're, we're adding or removing them. All right. So let's do this with PowerShell as well. I'm going to show you both options, both PowerShell as well as the Bash shell. Okay, here we are. And we're just going to copy paste the command from the lab instructions. So the command let here is called the new AZ-VM, very nice and short. And as options, we're giving it the resource group name, which in our case was actually a little bit different. And then the location, the name, the image, the zone, and then the size of it, and then credentials. And for credentials, we're just going to run the get credential commandlet. And now that we're here, I can just copy paste our real resource group name from there. There we go. Cool. And now it asks us for our credentials that we want to upload into the machine. So I'm going to use the same username, local admin, and then my very good password. Right, so now it's creating our virtual machine. All right, now it's done. Another commandlet that we could use here would be the get AZ-VM. That gives us a list of our virtual machines, right? Okay. Then we could stop it, right? So if we take there's a status flag here that gives us the a little bit more information. And here you can see the power state is running. So now we can stop our AZ-VM. And we need to give it the resource group name, which was AZ-104 RG8 LOD. There we go. And then the name was my PS. Cool. So now it's going to ask us, are you sure that you actually want to stop that machine? Yes, we are. And now it's stopped. So again, if we go to get AZ-VM, you can see that the virtual machine has been deallocated. That means that we're not paying for the CPU or memory of the virtual machine. We're only paying for the disk, right? And yeah, any public IPs that we had are now released as well. Okay, so I think that's it. Let's move over to Bash. And do the same thing here. So we do AZ-VM create. I'm going to name it my CLI virtual machine. Resource group. Content type. Resource group. It's supposed to be AZ-104 RG8. There we go. The image, let's now do a Ubuntu, so a Linux machine. The admin username could be local admin. And then we want to generate SSH keys. All right, it has created our machine. We can do AZ-VM list. It gives us everything. Let's do out. Table. There are our virtual machines. And now we could also deallocate it. So here the verb is deallocate, not stop. And we need to put in the resource group. And then the name, CLI/VM. All right, and that should be now have taken care of that. And we need to maybe see some details. VM show name line. Okay, use that. And then here we should be able to see the current power state is VM deallocated. Right. So again, we're not paying for the CPU, just paying for the disk. All right, let's delete everything from this resource group. And then that way we are stopping any charges. Thanks a lot for listening to me in this lab, and hopefully see you in the next one. Till then.